Hey guys, so today I want to talk about what heat sources to heat your truck, camper, van, RV, whatever. And not just any heat sources. Heat sources that are actually going to work in our Canadian winters and get you through it. Let's talk about it. So at the moment right now, I am in the Canadian prairies, and as you can see, the leaves are falling off, colors are changing, it's getting colder. I just had my first night here that was basically +2, and you could definitely feel it a bit. So that got me thinking, got me revising, as this is a new camper to me. And with it being a new camper, I had to do some mods to the heating system to get it to actually keep the tanks warm and keep everything else warm. So that got me thinking, why not talk about different heat sources that you could use that would actually work in a real Canadian winter? And I think the first one to bring up, because it's probably the most popular and it's one of the best, and that's going to be the diesel heater. So this is my 5 kilowatt Chinese diesel heater. I know a lot of you have asked me to install one and suggested it, and that's a great suggestion and everything, and I'm going to get to why I haven't in this video. But right now I actually just want to talk about these because they are really cool. This is a Chinese version. The better brand to buy is Espar, Webasto, Eber, Spatch, I can't say it, sorry, and Planer would be the Russian version. Now there's also better Chinese versions like Lavender. They make a better Chinese version, and the Hilkeroi or something, that's supposed to be a better one too. This is a Max Speeding Rods version, and they're all basically the same kind of same idea of how they're built and everything like that. The only difference is the 2 kilowatt is a lot smaller than this, and the 5 kilowatt, well, this is a 5 kilowatt, so it's a lot bigger. Now these, how they work is basically you have your intake, which is for the combustion chamber, and this is your exhaust. This right here is your fuel line that you attach to your fuel pump, that attaches to your fuel filter, that attaches to your fuel tank. Now, this being a diesel truck, I could hook it into my diesel tank, but I would lose the capability of being able to use it while the camper's off, which can happen in cold weather when the truck breaks down or something like that. And I gotta place this at a campsite for the time being. So for giggles, let's rip this thing apart really quick. They're not very hard to. You go like that, pull this out, and now I can kind of show you how this works. So this is your fan here. What it does is it sucks in the air going this way, pulls it in, and then sends it over this. So this would be, basically it's your heat exchanger. So what the heat exchanger does is basically heats the air that is going over top of it, and then it comes out this side at a very hot temperature. So these are extremely efficient. They'll pull about 9 to 11 amps when they're starting up, and that's because of the glow plug in them, and that's basically heating the chamber and starting basically the ignition of the diesel to produce a flame inside that, well, heats the heat exchanger. And after it's been running for about 20 minutes, the glow plug isn't using power anymore, and it's the fan that's using power. So that brings it down to what is it? I think usually 1 or 1.5 amps, not a lot, really, really little power usage. So if you're running these for a long time, these can be great for that if you have a limited power. Now, how much diesel do they use? On their lowest setting, it really sips the diesel, and on its highest setting, it uses about a half a liter per hour, is what I've been able to find out about it. If you're in something that's bigger that needs ducting and everything, these can be a little bit more challenging as they do not have the CFM to push through a lot of ducting. I have found that out because I actually had one of these in my last truck camper. Actually, last 2 truck campers I had it in. Now, my first truck camper was very small, no insulation. This was perfect for it. This replaced a 12,000 BTU furnace in there, and this was too hot in that truck camper when I was out in April camping in -10. So being able to use one of these in something like that in an older truck camper, that's awesome. If you're doing a van build, these are kind of a no-brainer. You basically throw one of these in, and especially if you have a diesel tank already, tap that tank, hook this up, Bob's your uncle. Life's good. You got a huge, massive fuel tank for it. But even if you have a gas van, you can find I believe it's the Webasto and the S-Bar in a gas version, and you can just plumb it right into your tank. Now, if you want to, though, you can just use one of these Chinese ones in a diesel version and basically just have an auxiliary tank that they usually come with, and you can do that. It's pretty simple. Now, the negative with these Chinese ones is they can be hit and miss. They can be more finicky and more prone to having issues. When I tried to put this into my Northern Light 9.6, I ended up having issues with it basically overheating, and I think that was due to me needing it to be ducted into a larger space. So I was trying to duct it into my tanks area and also into where my valves were. And so that was a long stretch for it to go, and it was ending up overheating the casing and shutting off. There is ways around that. You could add less ducts. You could install 2 heaters and have one on closer to where you need heat. That's a possibility too. Do one for the cabin, one for the basement. But all in all, that led me to just keeping the furnace, and that brings me to my next heat source. This is my Atwood model 7916. It is a 16,000 BTU furnace, and it runs off propane. Now, I'm going to show you guys something, because there's a lot of myths with these that they produce moisture, and I'm actually going to show you guys the heat exchanger. So if you look down right there, that is your heat exchanger. So that will have your flame inside of it, and what that does is it exhausts outside right here. So this actually works exactly like your diesel heater would. The only differences are the fuel source and the blower in this. The blower inside a propane furnace is what is the biggest power hog. And the reason it's a big power hog is because it has a lot of pressure to it. It's a very powerful fan, and it's pushing a lot of air. So when you need to heat up the area really, really quickly, that you can turn on, and it will have this camper from basically -20 to +20 in probably about 10 minutes. It's quick, really quick. Now, the other great thing about that too is you have the options on the side of that furnace to actually add ducts, and not your quacking kind. These kind. So this is a 2-inch duct. I actually used it on that one, and I have this one dedicated going to my dump valves. The reason I wanted to have one dedicated going to the dump valves is because that's usually the coldest area in your camper. It's the farthest away from the furnace and the farthest away from the heat. So my furnace being in the back there and kind of near all that was kind of really nice, because my last truck camper, it was very hard to get over to that one with the furnace. And it wasn't until I was able to find another fitting to be able to put on the side of the furnace so I could actually add one of these 2-inch ducts to it that I could actually get the heat to that area. Now, the other duct basically just dumps into where the tanks are and the rest of the lines are underneath in the basement. Now you could achieve this with a diesel heater, but I would almost say that it would be it would be a long run for the diesel heater to push that much air through to those spots, and it can cause complications. I've seen people do it too, and it does work. But there is the other fact too that I find, and I'm going to get a lot of hate for this, I find the propane furnace to be a bit more reliable. Like, hear me out. This camper's a 2001. That propane furnace is from 2001. It's old, but I can go and hit the switch, turn it on, and it works. It just fires up, it just goes. Now I know they can have their issues, but relatively they are just as simple to work on as a diesel heater. So it's kind of a pick your poison type of deal. And in my case, the fact that I don't have to rip it apart and clean it is kind of a bonus to me. There's also the fact too, everything in this camper runs off of propane, just about, other than the electricity stuff, of course. But like your stove, your fridge, your water heater, they all run off of propane. So me adding a diesel heater would just be me basically, I still have to fill my propane, but I also have to fill a diesel tank too. Like, there's a lot of reasons for why I haven't gone to a diesel heater and just gotten rid of the propane furnace. And it's kind of just the fact that I find there wasn't much of a gain to go to a diesel heater. And honestly, I just have no complaints about my propane furnace. Savings wise, I think I would save maybe $50 a month in the dead of winter with the diesel heater. But that's subjective too, because I'd be asking a lot of it to heat the basement and this entire living area. BTU wise, they're both very similar. The diesel heater 17,000, that's 16,000. So maybe I would get a bit more out of the diesel heater. I don't know. I'd have to actually try it. And I might still one day try it. If I find that this winter that my furnace isn't keeping up in here, then yeah, I'll install a diesel heater and use it as a supplemental heat. Or maybe it'll be that good and I'll just use it as my only heat. Who knows? So another great thing about propane furnaces is the fact that there's like a vast different sizes of furnace you can get. And something larger like a fifth wheel, they're going to have something like a 45,000 BTU furnace. Now that thing's going to rip through propane, but it's also going to heat that thing like, yeah. Something Bigfoot's famous for is in their 2500 series, they actually have a 30,000 BTU furnace, and they really do use all the ducting with it, and that is something fantastic. I have a bit of a gripe with Northern Light on this year because I had to add all the ducting for it. They do now add all the ducting and do it properly in their new ones, but in these older ones they did not. You have to do a bit of a DIY job there. Now, those bigger furnaces, they will also use a lot more power. They have a much bigger fan in them, and they are pushing that air. They can use upwards of 5 to 7.5 amps. I've even heard of ones using 9 amps. That's a massive, massive furnace. But in the gist of it heating everything, if you have the power to run it, that thing's going to keep you warm really well. Now, something you have to watch for with propane heat is the fact that if you're in temperatures that are colder than -30, get yourself a magnetic block heater, put it on the side of the tank, about 250 watts one, that should be good. And it'll make sure your propane keeps vaporizing. So at I think it's like 42 or 43 Fahrenheit degrees Celsius. Does it really matter at that temperature? At that temperature, it'll actually basically turn to liquid and you can almost pour the stuff out. So just having that block heater on there or in the space where your tanks are there, it'll actually heat. I found mine in -40 was able to heat both tanks enough that it kept everything running in there. And I was using all systems, except for water. Usually about -30, I winterize. I don't bother. It gets too crazy, especially if you're like driving around in it and everything. It's just, yeah. Now running that little block heater like that, the best thing you can do for that is get a campsite and plug it in that way. That's, I don't know, at those temperatures, I really say just go get a campsite. Your life's going to be a lot easier. And now talking about being plugged in, that brings me to our next heat source. This is my little friend. It's just an electric heater. So I actually bought this last year when I went through that -40. I decided that I want something to supplement my propane furnace while in those temperatures because it was very cold. I was surviving in the camper with the propane furnace just being on, but it was also to the point I was like, okay, I need something to supplement this. So I went and got this, and that kept the camper absolutely like almost too hot. You would be shocked at how much heat one of these puts out. It's unreal. It's probably your best source of heat if you're able to use it. Obviously, if you have a much bigger rig, you're probably going to want a bigger one of these or a couple of these, but these will heat up your space really good. They are a dry heat just like the furnace and just like the diesel heater. Obviously, they don't exhaust because they run off electricity. But the biggest downfall with these is they run off electricity. And they run off a lot of it. So you're going to want to be plugged in. And you're probably going to want a 30 amp plug if you can get it. Because this little thing pulls 1500 watts. And if you have it running for the all night, then you're going to pull a lot of power. And I don't think anyone really has a battery system. Well, if you do have a battery system that big, kudos to you. Please tell me where you hide it all. This is why I really go to campsites when it gets to about -30, is I can plug this in and it just makes life easier. I save money on propane this way. And I like this so much that I actually decided to go pick up a 200 watt one that I'm going to put in my dump valves compartment and try to see if I can go into even colder temps with this, with water on, because I think that would be actually a really cool thing to test out. So I don't know, we'll see about this winter. We'll see how brave I get. This is another great alternative if you are parked up somewhere and you're staying somewhere for the entire winter, or you have a generator that's able to run these too. That's another great thing. My generator can run this, but if it's running this, that's about all it's doing. So usually if I'm using this, I'm plugged in at a campground somewhere. Which brings me to the next thing. This one is probably everyone's favorite. Here, I gotta get rid of this. Sorry, little friend. Probably one of the most popular things. When someone thinks of winter camping, they think of a fire inside a little cabin. And you're just like cooking off of it. You're fully self-reliant. And it's so wonderful. And that's when the magic of a wood stove happens. A wood stove is probably the most reliable source of heat you could ever find. When all else fails, the wood stove is there and it's going to work. You basically put some wood in there, light a fire, and you have heat. You can cook off of it and you just don't have to worry about it failing on you. Now, personally, that's about where it ends. Practicality, if you are someone like me who needs to keep the camper warm at all times because you're running water and you need to keep your lines from freezing, trying to duct the heat from the wood stove, well, I'm sure there's someone out there who could figure it out, maybe like a radiant heat type thing, but it sounds very complicated and I would rather just use a diesel heater or a furnace to do it. The wood stove is perfect if you are parked up somewhere and you don't want to waste money on propane or diesel and you just want to use the wood that you have around you. So they're great for off-grid applications. They're also great if you're parked up in a campground all year. I've heard a lot of people say pellet stoves too. They work good. I do think the wood stove is probably one of your best bets if you are parked up somewhere and you just want that. I think something great is one of the mini wood stoves, and then usually people will have a diesel heater also. So if you're running the two of them and you're basically using the diesel heater when the wood stove's off. That's awesome. Yeah, you can't go wrong. And you could do that with a propane furnace too. Either way. For me personally, I don't think I could put a wood stove in here. I like everything, every inch of this space I enjoy. And the only place that I could think of putting it is maybe above the propane tanks, but I don't think that's a smart idea, obviously. Maybe one day if I own a cabin somewhere, I'll do a wood stove. That'd be cool. So that's all, you guys. And I didn't bring up the catalytic heaters like the Wave 3 and the Buddy heater. And that's because they kind of exhaust inside and I don't actually like them very much. And I don't think they're adequate enough for living in your truck camper in Canada. Maybe on Vancouver Island, they'd be okay. But over here in Alberta, I would say just go get a diesel heater. That's your next cheapest route. And there's so much information on them. Like an install, I'm sure anyone can do it. And I'm sure there's more than enough people in the community willing to help you in installing it. And because I don't want to see anyone freeze to death. And no matter what, any of these heat sources that you choose, the diesel heater, the electric, the propane furnace, the wood stove, as long as it works for you, that's what matters. If what's working is working, I wouldn't get too hung up on trying to replace something that's working good. That can be a wormhole in itself. So that's all I have for you guys today. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to like and subscribe. And I can't wait to take you with me on the next one. Later.